Hello. Today I would like to talk about polygons and just give you a general understanding of polygons, things that go wrong with them whenever you're working with them, and what the different issues are called and how to go about fixing them if you do have any of these issues. A lot of times, new users or people who are new to modeling in general will jump right into following some modeling tutorials um, without actually having a general understanding of how polygons work and what polygons are. And then along the way, they develop quite a few different problems that keeps them from moving on or creating a clean model, and a lot of times it will discourage you, and sometimes you'll just get really frustrated because things aren't going the way they are. And something I hear a lot in the classroom, which is really kind of a pet peeve of mine that I don't like to hear, is things like Maya's not doing quite what I want it to do, or it's not working for me, or just a general blaming of the program itself, the software. And even though it does have its quirks, just like any other 3D software, it does have bugs, and every once in a while it crashes and so on. I find that 90% of the time the software, the program, be it Maya, 3ds Max, whatever it is, Modo, whatever, is usually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. However, the user's ignorance or lack of knowledge of how to create clean geometry in an efficient way creates a lot of problems along the way. So I hope that in explaining some simple things about polygons in general, that will alleviate a lot of those issues, and you'll be able to create clean models. You'll be able to recognize issues whenever they arise, and if you find them later, you'll know how to go about fixing them. So I'd like to start just talking about general components that a polygon is made of. So if I go to create polygon, and I'll just create a plane. Let's go into shaded mode and take a look at this plane. I'll go over to my channel box here. Just to simplify this a little bit, I'm going to take my divisions all the way down to 1. Move this guy up a little bit. So every polygon is made up of 3 different components in its simplest form. The first of those components is a vertex. So if I just right click on my polygon and go over to vertex, you'll see what a vertex is. So a vertex is a single point in space that has no width, no height, no depth. It's just a single point in space. And a quad, a polygon with 4 sides, is made up of 4 vertices or vertex, as you can see. The second component is an edge. So if I go right click on my polygon and go to edge, you'll see that we have these edges. Now an edge is any line between 2 vertices. So even with a polygon, or a vertex or 2 vertexes and an edge, you still do not have a polygon. A polygon is the combination of 3 components. So the other component is a face. So if I go to face, you'll see that now we have an area in the middle here that is made up of the space. So in its simplest form, let me go ahead and just delete a vertex here. So in its simplest form, a polygon is a triangle. So you cannot have a simpler polygon than a triangle. It's made up of 3 vertexes or vertices, 3 edges, and one face. Now in render time, in reality, every polygon, no matter how many edges it has, is always simplified down into vertexes, into triangles. Even if they don't appear to be triangles, they are always simplified down to be triangles. So what I mean by this is, if I just undo here back to where I have a quad, I can take these vertices here and move them around, and you'll notice that little pop that happened right there, and I'll explain that here in a second. But even though we do not see an edge coming down this line, our quad is tessellated or simplified into two triangles. So if you ever hear anyone say, don't model with triangles, avoid triangles at all costs, they are wrong. Triangles are not bad. They are the simplest form of a polygon, and they are completely fine to have in your model. There's a reason we don't want a lot of those, and I will explain that here in a few minutes. But for the most part, triangles are not bad. They are the easiest way to interpret a polygon. So the reason that pops whenever I move, you'll see that pops like that whenever I move this vertice around. That's because Maya is trying to figure out how it wants to interpolate this square. So how do I want to divide this square up into two triangles? Maya is asking itself. So when this vertice is way down here, it decides to divide it up this way. So sort of cut an edge right down the middle, so you have two triangles this way. If I start to lift this vertice up here, that pops, and Maya at that point decides to interpret or interpolate that square a different way. So so that's basically what's happening, and that's why that's popping whenever we move that vertice around. So let me go ahead and move these guys back down. So modeling in triangles is completely fine. Modeling in quads is even better. And that's only because it's easier to stay organized while you're modeling in quads. While we're modeling in quads, we can do things like edge loops and bridge and stuff like that. And that kind of makes it a little more difficult when we're modeling in all triangles. So it's completely fine to model with triangles, to have triangles in a model. But ideally, you want to stick to quads. Now, there is something called an n-gon. An n-gon is anything with more than 4 edges. So we have a quad here. It has 4 edges. If I delete one of my vertexes or vertices, I have a triangle that's made up of 3 edges. A quad is anything that's made up of more than 4 edges. So 5, 6, 7, 8. And the reason this is bad, if I go ahead and just create an edge loop here, so this essentially gives me 2 quads. And then if I come in and select my edge, this is another very important point here. So if I go in and select my edge here and hit delete, it still looks like I have a quad. But if I hover over my edges, you'll see that they're still separate. So if I go to my vertex mode, I still have 2 vertices here, even though I deleted that edge. So sometimes, even though something looks like a quad, it may not be a quad. And I'll kind of show you how to get rid of this problem, or just be aware of it while you're modeling in a minute. So if I go in and let's move these guys out. So see what we have here. So what we have now is an n-gon, or a 6-sided polygon. An n-gon is anything with more than five or more edges. You never want to have, no matter what, never have a n-gon in your model. With certain exceptions, but as a newcomer to polygonal modeling, you should avoid n-gons at all cost. And the reason for that is whenever we start moving our polygon or our vertices all around, like so, you see that some crazy things are going to start happening there. And that's because Maya is trying to figure out how to break this up into all triangles. As I said before, every polygon is eventually divided up into triangles. So Maya is having a really hard time with this n-gon, this six-sided polygon, because it can't figure out how to divide this up properly into triangles. So this is a bad thing. This is something we don't want. We don't have much control over it. Maya's kind of doing with it what it wants to. And in a lot of cases, a lot of game engines will not even try to compute or calculate an n-gon, a polygon with more than 4 sides. It'll just not show up. So you'll have a model with a hole in it because you have an n-gon. And just to show you an example of, how bad this is I have this kind of arranged the way it is, and Maya's just kind of doing its thing with it. But say that's not really what I want, and I find this n-gon, I can come in and I can split it like that, and I'll get a completely different result. Now I'm telling Maya how I want that polygon to be split up. Like so. Now the reason we want to stick to quads, let me back up. Let me go ahead and delete these vertices, is because it's a little more easy to stay organized with quads. So if I take an edge here and I extrude it, a few times like so, what we have is an edge loop. So this makes it very easy to work with. I can take my split polygon tool and I can kind of go about adding more detail to it this way. And then say take a few of my vertices and I can start to maybe give that a little roundness by just dropping those down like that. And if I want to take my insert edge loop tool, that's very easy to do that way. So working in all quads and all squares, which are 4-sided polygons, is very easy to work with, and that's typically why we want to work with these. Now remember, eventually it's all going to get split down to vertices when you render or you bring it into a game engine. Excuse me, not vertices but triangles. Every polygon becomes triangles at some point. So the reason it's kind of difficult to work with triangles, I'll just grab my split polygon tool here and make, actually let me just go to, I'll just go ahead and triangulate this whole guy. So I'll go to mesh, triangulate. So this makes it all triangles. Let me go to shading and wireframe on shaded, just so we can see that wireframe. So now this is all triangles, which again is fine because that's what's going to happen to it anyway. However, it's hard to work with at this point, being all triangles. If I try to use my insert edge loop tool, it's just not going to work because it's trying to split it up into triangles. And if I try to use my split polygon tool to add a straight line through, I have to do twice as many clicks because now I'm clicking through these triangles, and what I have now is not all triangles. You see that I'll have a triangle here and a quad here. So triangles are fine to have in your model, but they're kind of difficult to work with. So that's why we like to work with quads. And again, n-gons are bad because we don't have so much control over them. Maya is going to kind of calculate and interpolate them as it likes, and that may not be how we want them to be interpolated. So one valuable thing to know whenever you're deleting edges, so say I come in here and I want to get rid of all of these edges. So I'll get rid of this one, and I'm just double clicking to select that whole edge loop there, and say I want to get rid of these guys. So ideally, or generally, you would think that you could just hit delete and that would be okay. But if you just hit delete, that only deletes the edges. So I still have all of those vertices there. So even though you know, this may look like a quad or four-sided polygon, it's actually a pretty big n-gon, because everywhere one of these vertices are is creating another edge. So what we have here is a really big n-gon. So to fix that problem, you just undo deleting those. What you want to do, instead of just hitting delete to get rid of an edge, is hit Control Delete, and that will delete the edges and the vertices. So now what I have is in fact a quad with 4 vertices and 4 edges and 1 face. Okay, so that's generally the simple version of a polygon. That's why we want to usually work in quads, and that's why we want to avoid n-gons. So next, I'd like to talk about some typical problems with geometry that happen, and how to fix them and how to keep an eye out for them. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is a lamina face. So to explain what a lamina face is, I'm going to go to Create Polygons, Cube. And I will delete these center faces. So what we have is a single object with 2 faces, 2 quads, but they're still a single object. So a lamina face is basically when you have 2 faces like this that are kind of laminated together. And I'll kind of show you how to find that and recognize that and why that's a problem. So the first thing I always like to do whenever I start modeling is pull up my polygon details, or my poly count. And to find that, you're going to go to Display, Heads Up Display, Poly Count. And that will just bring up this little information here to show you how many polygons you have in the scene. So if I click on my object there, you'll see that faces, we have 2 faces. But tries is the real count of polygons, because again, everything gets simplified down into triangles. Every square is 2 triangles. So I have 4 triangles in my scene here. So keeping an eye on these 2 numbers will kind of let you know if there's anything wrong with your polygon objects. So let's get back to talking about what a lamina face is. So a lamina face is two different or two faces that are kind of laminated together. And I'll show you how this happens, or a common way this happens a lot of times. But here's just an example of what it is. So if I take this face here and I merge it with this one, you'll see that what we have looks like one polygon. It looks like one face, one polygon, when in fact it's two that are sort of laminated together. And if you look over here in your tries, you'll see that I still have 4 tries, even though it looks like I only have 2. You'll also notice that my polygons here is kind of doing this weird thing. It's got a lot of noise and kind of stuff that's happening in here. That's called z-fighting or depth fighting. And that means that Maya, because those two faces are right on top of each other, they're as close as they can possibly get. They're basically existing in the exact same space. So Maya's having trouble figuring out which one of those it should display. So that's why we're having some problems here. And if I go in and just go to my face mode and select that and hit delete, you'll see that now I have 2 tries and 1 face. So if you ever see the term lamina face, now you know what it is, and now you know how you can probably go about fixing it. Let me just back up. You can either delete it, or you could try going in and merging the faces. So if I just go to my face mode and select my entire object and go up to Mesh Tools, I should have a merge tool. Maya has updated. This is the newest version currently, Maya 2015, and they've kind of separated things out into different different menus. So whereas you used to have mesh and edit mesh, now you have mesh, edit mesh, and mesh tools. So it kind of makes it a little interesting for me to find things. And it doesn't look like we just have a simple merge tool anymore, which is fine. I will show you another way to clean this up in a few minutes, but let's just move on to the next thing I want to talk about. So the next common problem you may have, is something called a T-face. And a T-face is basically an edge that has more than 2 faces connected to it. So if I create an edge here and I extrude this edge like so, you'll see that that kind of makes a T. And this is called a T-face. So you have one edge with 3 faces connected to it. This is something that in the physical world can't happen because these polygons do not have a depth. They are sort of infinitely thin. So realistically, this would never happen. And if we try to smooth this, you'll see that we get a really weird interpretation or interpolation of that smooth. And sometimes you'll see that in a model, and that means you have T-faces. So that's something else to look at. And I'll show you really quickly how that may happen. And that typically happens whenever you use the extrude tool. So if I were to select these 2 faces here, and I'm going to go use my extrude tool, let's go back to smooth, and extrude these faces out a little bit, a couple times like so. If I go inside here, it looks like everything is okay, and it did not create T-faces, or internal geometry. And the reason it worked well for me is because I had, if I can find it, it has changed, or has they've moved it. Basically what I'm looking for is keep faces together. There used to be a little check box here in the menu, but it's also, if I select my extrude tool and I go over to my channel box, go all the way down. Right now I have keep faces together on. If I change this to off, change that to off, and then extrude quite a bit, and I'll extrude one more time. Oops. Make sure that's off. What's happening is I've extruded and I have internal geometry. So if I'm unaware that my keep faces together is off, then it's very easy for you to go in and make this internal geometry without thinking about it, and then going and selecting your vertices. As I typically do whenever I'm modeling, I select my vertices and then I merge them together. Which, again, I'm trying to figure out where that merge components, that's what I'm looking for. So if I go to select all my vertices and then go to merge components and merge those together like so, what happened now is this created T-faces for me. So if I try smoothing this, it's not going to smooth the way I want it to. It's created internal geometry, which is T-faces. And sometimes this can also create Laminar faces. So that's another issue we want to avoid. So whenever you're extruding using your extrude tool with multiple faces, like so, if I go to extrude, make sure you always have keep faces together on, and that will extrude them together. Now in this case, all those faces are already separate, so it's really not doing me much good. Now if you're just extruding one face, it's not going to matter much, just because you have no multiple faces to keep together there. But again, now if I go in, as I typically do when I'm modeling, and I select all of my components and go to merge components, I've created all this internal geometry that I do not want. So the simplest way to go in and fix that is just to find them and delete them, like so. And you'll see that this has also created Laminar faces for me too. Another way to fix geometry, and it's something I periodically do as I'm modeling, is a cleanup. So if you go to Mesh, Cleanup, you'll get this dialog box here. And this will help you clean up your geometry. So my operation, cleanup matching polygons, apply to selected object. So I have my object selected. And then what do I want to fix by tessellation? So I like my four-sided faces. I don't want to get rid of them. However, I don't want faces with more than four sides. So I'll go ahead and click that to get rid of faces with more than four sides. In some cases, as I'm modeling, I may be using faces with holes or concave faces or non-planar faces, so I'll keep all of those for now. I just want to get rid of faces with more than four sides. remove geometry. I want to get rid of all of my Laminar Faces. So that's these guys that has that weird Z fighting going on. And I want to get rid of non-manifold geometry. Non-manifold geometry is anything that shouldn't be. Anything that's geometry that's just not clean. It won't act the way it should. So cleanup will attempt to get rid of those. So basically I just bring up my cleanup by going to mesh cleanup. Just to reset all our settings back to default. I'll keep everything at the default. I will select my faces with more than 4 sides, Laminar Faces, and non-manifold geometry, and then hit apply. So this didn't do exactly a great job at cleaning everything up. Let's try it again, just one more time to see. Nope. So in some cases, if you have this sort of non-manifold geometry in here, it may be best if you just go in and manually delete it. Like so. So you'll see that basically what that cleanup did was it tried to fix things by separating out the vertices, but it just didn't quite go as planned. So I'll select all of my edges one more time. Go to Edit Mesh, Merge Components. And you'll see that now we look nice and smooth. We don't have any faces or T-faces or anything like that. So I hope that this this will help you kind of find problems as they occur and fix them as you see them. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of what polygons are, how they work, common problems with them, and how to fix those problems. The other really quick thing I want to talk about is normals. So if I go and let's create a sphere. So I'll go to Create, Polygons, Sphere. And let's just knock down our subdivisions a little bit to something like 10. And we'll turn off our wireframe on shaded. So let me turn the grid off too, so we can see a little bit better. So our sphere here has all these hard lines all over it. And basically, this is because of something called normals. Every polygon has a normal. And a normal is basically the direction at which light is going to bounce off, or light is going to affect our polygon object. So at the moment, our normals for every one of our polygons is saying that this polygon is completely flat. So that's why we get these hard edges around our polygons. If we select our object and go up to normals, soften edge. Now if we look at it, we'll see that now we have a fairly soft looking object. And that's because all of the normals for our polygons, instead of saying our polygons are completely flat or perfectly flat, now it's saying our polygons are kind of round. So as the light gets to the edge, it's going to kind of fall off in a smooth way. So our object looks round. Now you can control these normals with quite a bit of detail. So if I just select one edge loop here, or let's go ahead and select 2 like that, just by double clicking on them, and go to normals, harden edge. So now we have, if I just click off on my object, now we have something that looks smooth here, but along those 2 edges it looks kind of hard. So changing your normals and kind of fiddling with your normals, you can get quite a bit of a different look to your geometry as you're modeling. So that's something you should keep in mind. Typically, as I'm modeling, I kind of like to switch between hard normals and smooth normals, just because it kind of gives me a different view of what I'm modeling. And that's why I have them up here in my little tool shelf to soften and harden my normals, like so. So that's your normals. Sometimes they can cause a little bit of problems, and depending on how you're modeling, they may not look the way you want them to. It may look like your geometry is being messed up, but a lot of times it can just be the normals. So you may be modeling a head, a human head or something, and expect everything to look nice and smooth, like so. And then if you go in and do like an edge loop here, that's automatically going to give you a typically sometimes that will give you a hard normal. In this case it did not. So sometimes you'll get something that looks kind of like this, and you'll be like, why does it look like it's two separate shapes and not just one? And generally that's just because your normals are kind of weird. So you might need to just go in and either smooth them all or harden them all, depending on how you want to see them. So don't forget to always delete your history. Sometimes you can get a lot of history built up, which will slow down Maya. Every time you move a vertices, a new piece of history is created, or every time you extrude, you get new history there. So remember to go in and go to Edit. As you're modeling, go into Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that'll just clear out your history for your current model. Okay, so I hope this helps give you a better understanding of how polygons work, some of the problems that can happen as you're modeling, how to avoid them, and how to fix them if you do find them.